But yet there is no existence of a foreign agent registry for people who come here from another country, who are registered, who are given diplomatic immunity by this government, who engage with the government, who engage in their own affairs here. We don't have a foreign agent registry. And when asked about it, it's just continued consultations and some gaslighting view that a foreign agent registry would in some way be racist. You know who doesn't think that's racist? The Chinese Canadians who are intimidated in their own homes. Not only the Chinese Canadians, the Iranian Canadians who have called our offices with a blurred out background in a car far away from their homes because they are terrified of the intimidation that they feel from dictatorial regimes on the other side of the world. That is a shame. We want to see a foreign agent registry, and we want to see it now. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to speak in terms of regards in my questions with respect to the spreading of misinformation. Last Thursday, there was indication that was heckled to me indicating that I tried to say that the Prime Minister and the member in question had the same briefing. I stood up, Madam Speaker, and I said, and I quote right from Hansard, Mr. Speaker, it was never my intention to say that the Prime Minister and the member had the same briefing. If that is, in fact, what I said, I would apologize for saying that was the same briefing. Madam Speaker, you see, no matter what you tell the Conservatives, they have their certain spin. And it is about character assassination. As we continue with the debate, as they continue to want to ramp up the politicize this, it's more about the character assassination of the Prime Minister than it is about the issue. My question to the member is, when will the Conservative Party depoliticize and allow for committees like PROC to deal with the issue?
Member for Thornhill.
Madam Speaker, we'll depoliticize it when this government acts. I'm glad that this motion of privilege is not about this member. It isn't about this member. This member has gaslit Canadians into believing that that member got a briefing 2 years ago. And you can look into the parliamentary record to see it. He has disparaged the character of a member of this House. And he says himself, an attack on any member of this House is an attack on all members. So he should think about that.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary on a point of order.
On a point of order, the member indicated...
Order!
Yes, Madam Speaker, the member indicated, and what I was reflecting on was, in my question, was the issue that the member did get a general briefing, as other members have.
That has been dealt with by the Speaker, and I hope we can move from that. Honourable député de Beauport-Limoilou.
The Honourable Member for Beauport-Limoilou. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm trying to understand the government's inaction, but it's very difficult because so many times in this House, including the party that currently forms government, there were votes against harassment of communities, and especially a particular member. So I think the Liberal government is not walking the talk. And I think that when it's time to talk, there's lots of rhetoric, but when it's time to act, the government turns into a statue. What should the government have done since if it had put its beautiful words into action?
Madam Speaker, I thank the honourable member for the question, and I agree with her. The government hasn't acted on this. We had a motion in this House the government voted against that called for a public inquiry, that called for a foreign agent registry. That is the least they can do to show both Chinese Canadians and, frankly, Canadians right across the country from many, many diaspora communities who are intimidated by the regimes at home, who are fearful of their lives and their livelihoods and their families, just like was done to the member from Wellington, Halton Hills. They could show them that they actually take this seriously, that they actually take national security seriously. They would do that. They would vote in favor of many motions in front of this House that called for sanction on that.
Member for Esquimalt, Thank you
very much, Madam Speaker. I have intervened on this topic several times to implore members of the House to lower the temperature, and I applaud the member who just spoke because I think she did attempt to lower the temperature in the House and to focus on on real solutions. And my question to the member is, how does she see a way out of this impasse in the House where everything is being held up? And whether she might agree with me that the things that were in the Conservative motion were quite reasonable, and including the necessity of calling a public inquiry so we're not constantly saying he said, she said about what's happened here, and we can get an independent authority to judge the facts about foreign interference.
For Thornhill.
Speaker, I appreciate the question. Public inquiry would be one of the ways. A foreign registry would be another one of the ways. Canada doesn't have a legal definition for political interference. So what we have to do is we've got to find other things that happen where diplomats are potentially breaking other laws in order for us to investigate them. A foreign registry would allow us a legal definition, perhaps, of what interference is. The Australians have that, and that would be a good model to look at. And if the government was actually serious about this, they would at least engage in conversation and not just disparaging members of this House.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Bay of Quinte.
Madam Speaker, speak softly but carry a big stick was the foreign policy of Theodore Roosevelt, American president in the early 1900s, which meant softly spoken diplomacy backed by something that can make your word count when it mattered and make it stick. And we may not have the largest military in the world, population or government, but we do have trade, resources, and IP, and all of those can be used to ensure we uphold this great nation. It allows Canada to maintain its democratic system while simultaneously expelling any acceptable state actors that threaten our democracy. And why does it matter? Because this country matters, and this country's place in the world because it's becoming increasingly more hostile. Canada has always been a beacon of hope, a pillar of democracy and freedom, alongside our allies, including Europe, the United States, Australia, Japan, and South Korea, among many others. But our democracy is under threat, and the threat has infiltrated the very democratic system that we hold incredibly dear, and this government has failed to protect Canadians from foreign interference from Beijing. There have been no less than 8 police stations set up in Canada to monitor our own citizens here in Canada. 11 MPs were influenced in nominations and elections. And 2 years ago, the member from Wellington, Halton Hills, had his family threatened and intimidated by a Beijing operative over a vote to denounce the treatment of Chinese Muslim Uyghurs in China, and this government allowed the perpetrator to remain in Canada for 2 years. This country, this Prime Minister, have allowed Canada to be in an abusive relationship with China. China takes advantage of Canada, which has resulted in a speak softly and carry a small stick foreign policy, or to allow China to treat Canada as the small potatoes nickname it calls our Prime Minister. And Mr. Speaker, China is taking advantage of Canada. If you want proof of that, well, we can only compare it to a survey entitled 5 Signs Your Partner is Taking Advantage of You. You be the judge. Number 1, you constantly make excuses for them. You frequently compromise on the things you want. You're afraid of confrontation with them. You often find yourself waiting around for them. And you pay for dinner almost every night. We constantly make excuses for them. You only need to look at the Hansard for the last few weeks to the government tripping over itself, making excuses for China, even so far as blaming the MP for Wellington Halton Hills for this fact that his family went through hell. It was his fault.